Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Science, a Wednesday web chat where we highlight our fantastic researchers. I'm Madeline Arancibia, and I'm your host. And today's chat is going to feature Dr. Derya Akkaynak. Derya has been at FAU's Harbor branch since September 2019, and she's a postdoctoral fellow as a mechanical engineer and an oceanographer. And she does a lot of work trying to solve problems for underwater imaging and computational vision, specifically working on reconstruction of lost color and contrast in underwater photographs. And she also does some research trying to understand how the world appears to non-human animals, mostly in that underwater area as well. And she uses something called hyperspectral sensing in order to understand what they see. I'm gonna chat with her for a little while, but we do wanna hear from you guys as well. If you think of any questions for Derya throughout this chat, please let us know. If you are on Zoom, the Q&A button should be in the bottom center of your screen. If you're on Facebook, just comment your questions and we will answer those as well. But we'll get Derya joined in with us and go ahead and get started in just a moment. In the meantime, also, if you want to give us a shout out and say hello where you are watching from, we'd love to hear that as well. So. Hey, Derya, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Madeline. How are you? Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I'm doing well, and I'm so happy to have you here. So we got to talk a little bit earlier, so I know you've got some fun things in store for everyone, but I usually like to sort of start off at the beginning. What are some things that we should know about you as a person?
Well, perhaps a good place to start is my name.
Yeah.
Derya means ocean in at least 3 different languages that I am aware of. In Persian, Turkish, which is my native language, and Hindi.
Wow.
And I'm originally from a fishing village on the west coast of Turkey, Urla, that looks like beautiful like that. Mm-hmm. And maybe you'd be surprised to know I actually own 26 olive trees in my village, some of which are more than 200 years old. I don't own the sheep, but I own that tree.
I was literally just going to ask if you owned the sheep as well in that picture, because I thought for a second you were going to say sheep instead of olive trees.
No, that's neighbors' sheep. They come and graze, and it helps fertilize the land. So
your parents must have foreseen that you were going to be an oceanographer one day down the line to name you Ocean.
Questionable, because they named my older sister Deniz in Turkish, and now my sister is the master instructor for the cabin crews of Turkish Airlines, so she sort of took a different route.
Went into the air. Well, it seems to have worked out pretty well for you. So you grew up in Turkey, and did you say that that was a fishing village?
Yes, it's a small idyllic village on the west coast on the Aegean Sea, across from, perhaps some listeners may have been to some of the Greek islands. It's pretty close to Chios.
Okay. So if your name wasn't your inspiration, what really got you into science then?
I think it was my childhood in that village. And, you know, when I say childhood, we're talking more than 35 years ago. And as a child, I spent a lot of time in the water. We lived on the beach and just, you know, explored the habitat, the fish. I poked the animals. I watched their colors, their behaviors, and pretty much it was that free and independent time I got to do underwater research without getting any recognition for it. was the foundation of how I became an oceanographer. And there you see me with the sea bream, measuring up pretty well in scale. And to my right is my sister, C.
Did your family have boats and go out on the water, or would you just go to the ocean to go exploring?
My grandpa did have a small boat that they would go to the nearby islands to fish, but not any, you know, nothing international or oceanic. It was just a local sort of to earn, not to earn a living, but to catch your fish for dinner, essentially, explorations every day.
But sometimes you find cooler things in the little tide pools than you would out in the open ocean anyway, so.
Exactly. You can put me in an inch of water in muck and I will find something to stare at for a long time. Everything's interesting.
Definitely the makings of an oceanographer or scientist in general. So a child in Turkey to a world-renowned researcher doing really cool work. How did that process go for you?
Well, you'd be surprised to hear maybe I didn't start out in oceanography. I wanted to become a marine biologist, but in Turkey, the education system is very different than in the US. So I ended up studying aerospace engineering for my first degree, because how the system works is you don't get to go, or at least when I was 18, you didn't get to go to the college you wanted. Rather, everybody in the country took the standardized exam, scored something, and then depending on a list you made before you got your score, the system placed you somewhere in your list. So I got placed in aerospace engineering, which was actually my sixth choice. And I don't even remember what the first one was, but it wasn't marine biology because my father, who's an engineer, said, you should first become an engineer and then you can go back and study biology if you still want. So that's where I started. So maybe if there's some young people listening now who haven't figured out what they want to do, where they want to go, maybe I can remind them that the road is long and where you start doesn't dictate where you'll end up or where you want to end up. So anyway, I started in aerospace engineering. I graduated first from my university and I got accepted to MIT for a master's with a full scholarship. Studied more aerospace engineering, but I really could not feel passion for it. I was working on aircraft engines, thermodynamics of aircraft engines, and I didn't feel a connection. So I left school at that point and I got a job in consulting. That's where you see the real money part of this chart. And consulting, that was before the market crashed. So I actually made a lot of money. That's when I bought my 2.5-acre olive orchard. But after some time, I thought, I really, really want to see the ocean every day of my life, not just 2 weeks of the year when I'm on vacation. So that was the point where I said, okay, I'm going to turn my life around. I'm going to go to school to oceanography, and my passion will become my everyday life. And that was 2008, and I never looked back. So since I got my degree in oceanography, I've worked in Panama, Israel, Germany, US, and since last year, I'm here at Harbor Branch, which I'm loving Florida so far.
Okay, well, I'm sure Florida's loving you too. It's a pretty beautiful state, so.
Definitely, there's so much to see. It's so diverse. The pandemic, of course, limited our ability to explore, but so far, every part of it I've seen, I've really liked.
Yeah. And you were telling me earlier that actually your background is Melbourne Beach, right?
Yes, this is our local beach. I live in Melbourne Beach, so this is our local beach just down the street.
Oh my gosh, that's definitely a good place to live. And then Harbor Branch is also right on the water, so a good place to work. Stay near the water all the time.
Absolutely.
So in all of that time since, I guess, 2008, when you started getting more into the oceanography, what would you say is one of the things that surprised you the most in your research?
Well, a lot of my PhD years, I worked on the camouflage of animals like cuttlefish and octopus. And there's something surprising there every day, all the time, because these are incredible animals. But from my most recent works, Yep, there's a cuttlefish. Actually, I took this photo right outside of my house in Turkey, where my colleague and I were diving to study them in the field season of 2011, I believe. So that's a cuttlefish. It's a relative of octopus and squid, and it has a white bone inside. In the Americas, you cannot find them. So sometimes people think it's squid, but it's not. The one with the white bone, you can't find over here. But these animals dynamically, within milliseconds, change the color and the pattern and the dimensionality of their skin. They can go from 2D, and by raising these organs, make their skin 3D and then blend in with their surroundings. It's just absolutely incredible. So this is my favorite animal. I've worked with it for 6 years, and every time I see one now diving, it just makes me ecstatic.
I knew that they could change their color. I didn't realize they could change their texture too.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share some videos later that show that through a microscope in detail. It's really, really remarkable.
Well, and I've also heard that cuttlefish, as far as we understand, can't see color. So
yes,
how do they figure out what their surroundings are in order to match it?
So we have no idea, Madeline. You definitely heard right. In their eyes, they only have one pigment that senses one part of light. So that's actually, if you don't have two or more, you cannot discriminate colors. So that's what we call colorblind, one version of colorblind. So in their eye, using their cones, they cannot discriminate colors. However, they have what's called polarization vision. So they can see a different property of light that we can't see. So it's pretty alien to us. But that, some scientists think, might be giving them a second channel of color or some color information. And that's not the only cool thing about them, especially if you think octopus and the suckers on the arms. It's been shown that in their skin, there are these molecules that respond to light. So in a way, maybe in a distributed way, maybe they are able to sense light, and maybe they are able to sense color using their skin. All that being said, we don't know any of this for sure. So if there's anybody listening who would like to get a PhD on a really, really cool question without thinking it's impossible, this is a great question.
Most of what I learned about cuttlefish came from a podcast that I listened to that was an interview with a squid scientist. And she was saying the same sort of things about how, like, we don't know how they do it, but figuring out how has really great implications for things that you wouldn't even think of, like military uses for camouflage and things like that. So it's not like this pie in the sky, just like research for research's sake thing that you could actually do as a science career.
Absolutely. I think just for the curiosity of it, there's this animal that's related to a mollusk and, you know, has a relatively small brain, but then does this incredible repertoire of wearing different patterns for different occasions and does it in milliseconds. There's so much to learn there. It's really, really fascinating. And they're really delicious.
All those weird little invertebrates.
Yeah, exactly.
So your PhD was mostly cuttlefish, and then for your postdocs, where has your research sort of taken you since then?
I started my postdoc actually on the beautiful shores of the Red Sea in Eilat. There is a very strong marine lab there. Mm-hmm. Eilat is the southernmost city of Israel, and it's neighboring Jordan and Egypt. It's the northernmost tip of the Red Sea, Gulf of Aqaba. So I did my first postdoc there. I was there 3 years, where I entirely focused on understanding how images form underwater. When you click the shutter and take a photo, what happens to the light that was in the water that hit your sensor and gave you that image? Because if we can understand that, then we can reverse the blue-green impacts of water. And I actually discovered something really cool in that. The graph you're looking at now tells a 35-year story. And the story is that sort of 1990s, late 1980s is when digital cameras became commercially available along with underwater housing. So underwater photography, underwater computer vision sort of became an established field. It existed before, but it became easier for research labs to work in underwater imaging. And since that time, researchers thought or estimated that the parameters, the numbers that we need to use to reverse the color loss in underwater images, to take out that blue-green shades, we just need a constant number. So one number to correct the colors in an entire image. And I showed that that was based on math that was actually for imaging in the atmosphere. And for the ocean, those numbers, those parameters change with distance. So what you saw in the previous slide was that an assumption that was incorrect for 35 years, something that was assumed to be a straight line, a constant, is actually an exponentially decaying function, which explains why for the last 35 years, we hadn't had much success correcting colors in underwater images. So once I did that, it was easier to develop a computer program that actually applied this function to images and corrected the colors. You were just showing that, so we can go back to that. There we go. So here's some examples of what underwater images look like on the left, and just without any processing, the way your camera records them. And on the right, with the program that I developed that's called See-Through, that actually reveals the colors that are there in the water, but the light in the water masks them. And look at how colorful everything is, right?
Yeah, it's amazing, the colors that you can see in there. And I'm thinking back to like when I've been in the water, I guess the camera sees differently than my eyes see, because I see some of these colors, but not as vibrantly.
Yeah, so that's an excellent point, because we humans have in our brain something called color constancy. Our brain always tries to make the ambient light white. So let's say you're walking at night on a street. Most streets are or used to be lit by low pressure sodium lamps, and these lamps give out a yellow hue. So your brain will still see that light as white because it learned to. So when you dive or snorkel and you look at a reef, you don't see it as blue as the camera captured it. But of course the camera doesn't have a brain, or at least it doesn't have a brain that functions in the same way as our brain does. So it literally robotically senses the colors that are out there without doing anything about the light. So our experience is not these blue images on the left, but it's also not the corrected images you see on the right. It's something in between.
That makes sense, and is a really helpful tool. Really quickly, just a reminder for our audience, if you guys have questions about this program or about Cuttlefish or anything that we talk about, definitely ask those questions. Again, use the Q&A button bottom center of the screen on Zoom, or comment your questions on Facebook, and we will be able to answer all of those questions. But back to that see-through program, is that available to the public? Because I know I took some pictures on the Great Barrier Reef that do not look as beautiful as it was.
Madeline, not just yet. Actually, that's part of the work I'm doing here at Harbor Branch, because you can imagine an academic prototype program that works under known and controlled conditions can be significantly abused in a, casual use underwater. So you can hold the camera half out of the water, half in. You can change settings in the middle of recording something. So all of these real life scenarios need to be understood and handled before it can become available. The goal is to make it available as soon as possible, but it's a long road. So, I mean, let me say it this way, probably the coronavirus vaccine will come out before see-through becomes a software.
All right, but eventually, one day, we'll have
Eventually, yes, that's the goal. That's what we're working towards, yes.
I'm sure that as soon as it is available, the world of underwater photography as a recreational thing is just gonna explode even more.
And yes, and I hope also the scientific photography world, because that was actually one of our main goals for developing this, because now as a scientist, you go out to the reef or you send a robot and you come back to the lab with hundreds of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of images, which pretty much require manual processing. Yeah. Because you see how different the shades of the water and that the color, the overwhelming color you see is basically a reflection of the particles that are in the water molecules and the particles in the water. So that's different everywhere. It can change by season, it can change by pollution, it can change even in a short, 1 hour period of time. So now if we can automatically remove that shade and fix the blurriness with a program, your hundreds of thousands of images can be processed without a human in the loop. A human in the loop is not only tedious, but it's also very expensive. So I really, really hope that this tool will speed up the pace at which we're doing marine science, the pace at which we're learning new things about the ocean. So that's
definitely, yeah, very important to be able to assist with that and help us understand everything. Is this your favorite project that you've worked on, or do the cuttlefish have a special place in your heart?
Half and half. They actually are two pieces of the same puzzle, because when you look at a reef like this, and this is from Papua New Guinea that I took earlier this year, and you look at the corrected version and you see the colors and you think, what are they there for? Why is that blue? Why are there so many reds when nobody will be able to see the red? But then you look at a cuttlefish or an octopus and you think, well, you're camouflaging, you're almost exactly matching your background by synthesizing the colors in your skin, but the light anyway masks those colors. So why did you evolve to produce all those colors when nobody can see them? So it's all one big puzzle, and it's really exciting to me.
Well, I guess the other part of the puzzle then goes into your other work where you're trying to see how non-human animals see in the water, because maybe they can see the colors that we don't see, or can most of them not?
Exactly. And the animals that live underwater have a surprisingly diverse set of visual adaptations. They have different eye architectures. They have different filters in their eyes that creates a world for them that we have no visual idea about. So that's just so exciting to explore that.
It is amazingly colorful down there, and sometimes I wish I could be one of those animals and see from their eyes.
Well, maybe one day we'll have a camera that shows you the world like an eel, for example, and who knows what that's like.
Yeah, one day you'll be developing all of those cool technologies. So when you were doing all your postdocs, you had said that you did postdocs in multiple locations all over the world. And I'm guessing that you probably have done some good traveling outside of that as well. What would you say is the coolest place that science has taken you?
Well, I've been to many beautiful tropical places, but I've also been to cold and dull looking places. But dull aside, I'll have to say Antarctica was probably my most unforgettable expedition. I spent about 2 months on a British Antarctic survey research ship, and I operated a LiDAR. That's the yellow instrument in this photo that's really sensitive to measuring 3D structures of things. And what we were doing was I was measuring the ice thickness from the surface, and the rest of my lab had underwater robots that went under the ice to measure the ice thickness, to make a map of it from the bottom. And the goal was to see how fast the ice was melting, or not, but to assess that. So doing that, I spent about 2 months, and I got to interact with penguins, whales, seals. It was just a truly unforgettable alien experience. So hands down, I'm gonna have to say Antarctica.
I want to visit Antarctica, but I don't know that I could handle 2 months in Antarctica. Was it summer? I'm guessing it was summertime because it's bright out. But
yes, it was summertime there. And actually, I remember this was 2010 or 11, that I can't remember. But I remember there was one day that was unfortunately so warm that we all took a photo in our t-shirts. And since this was the British Antarctic Survey, the crew on land in the UK took a photo with their t-shirts, but they were freezing and we were in summer gear. And that was in one of the newspapers, just comparing how things can go in the age of global warming.
Yeah, wow, that makes me sad. I gotta go and visit soon.
I hope so. I hope so.
Wow. So how many continents have you been to then? I mean, you've got Antarctica, North America, you've got Asia.
Right. I haven't been to Africa.
Okay, you haven't been to Africa. That's the only one? That's
the only one. But, you know, it's still pandemic time. So I have a few more years to plan.
Yep. I'm sure that you'll get there soon, but wow, what a world traveler.
You know, that's one of the things that an oceanography lifestyle gives you, is that you want to go to all these places to see, because the ocean is one, right? We have one ocean. It's not different oceans. To see and to understand and to feel how life and everything else evolves. So I'm really happy I changed my life towards this direction and became an oceanographer.
Let your sister take over the skies.
Yes.
So I have a couple more questions for Derya, but again, send your questions in if you have them, and we'll be getting to your questions in just a moment. What would you say is your best advice that you give to a person who's interested in oceanography or mechanical engineering?
I'd say try to get internships or volunteer in research labs that do different things, because when we say oceanography, there are so many sub parts of it. There's biological oceanography, chemical oceanography. I'm doing engineering. There's physical oceanography. Some disciplines, some folks do modeling. They never go out to sea. Maybe you don't want to go out to sea, or maybe you do want to go out to sea. So I would say spend your summers, spend your holidays as much as you can working with research labs. And sometimes young people say, well, they don't take us seriously, or they don't get back to us, or they don't want interns. I'll tell you that many serious labs love having smart and curious interns. So when I have my lab, definitely there'll be opportunities for that. So experience different aspects of the work you're interested in. Maybe you'll find out you actually don't want to do that, or maybe you'll find out that you really do. So this is the only way to know.
Harbor Branch does have an internship program. It's not running this summer, but it's every summer, and it's actually a paid internship. So.
Oh, that's great. It's a paid internship.
Yeah, you get a stipend, and so it's a really cool thing that is available here, and that's made possible through a lot of different avenues, but internships are the way to go. And if you can find those paid ones, it's even better.
That is a great opportunity. Yes, a paid internship is rare. So That's Harbor Branch is a great program then.
Yeah. So we're gonna get to a couple public questions now. So our first one here is from Bailey. She is asking, how are cuttlefish eyes different from octopus's eyes?
Excellent question. Not much different. These are all sort of closely related in a biological sense. So they all share that one pigment in their eye that allows them to see, I think it was 540 nanometers, which corresponds to green light. So imagine if that's their actual vision and not supported by polarization vision or anything, they see everything as different shades of green essentially.
Okay.
But again, we have no way of knowing yet. Just hypothetical.
Hopefully one day we'll be learning that. Our next question here is from Stacy. She's asking, what is the most rewarding part of your work?
What a great question. There are
It's a tough one.
It's a tough one, and there are many. Sometimes, so maybe we can divide it into, sometimes there are things that are personally rewarding. For example, you have an idea and you talk about it to some folks and they say, oh, that'll never work, or oh, you can't do that, or you need this and that and it would take forever. And then you just do it. And that's really rewarding. But the more global aspect of rewarding is, of course, to discover something new about nature that we didn't know. So for example, now we have an algorithm, we can see colors in more or less an objective way. That means we can scale up and do this in large areas of the ocean. So who knows what we're gonna learn if we objectively survey the colors on the seafloor, right? That's gonna be a very rewarding find for me one day.
Yeah. Christopher is actually sort of going off of being able to see those cool colors. So he has a bit of a long comment here. I'll try and condense it a little bit. He's saying that C3 is a really revolutionary program and the corrected images were miraculous. He's annotating coral reef images and the distortion is hard for him to correctly ID the organisms. And so he's saying, with you applying mathematics and physics to correct the images, are we witnessing reality by using this program, or is it somewhere in between? Is it, like you mentioned with cuttlefish and mantis shrimp, sensing border spectrums or other portions of their environment? Are we only getting a visible perspective? No.
Another very good question. So this was Chris who asked?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Chris, please shoot me an email. But to answer the question for everyone, what essentially, so CISRU is a physics-based program. And what that means is it's not artificial intelligence. It didn't learn anything from a training image set to apply to images it hasn't seen. How it works is it has a physical model of how light is changed underwater. Because daylight is so well characterized, we actually know what it is generally at the surface, and we know what it becomes once it goes under the surface. So what CISRU is doing is, knowing those physics, it's reversing the changes that happen to light. In other words, it's not imagining anything that's not there. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you go diving at either a really murky place or really deep place. Let's say you go diving at 45 meters or 120 feet or something like that. And it's deep enough that there is no red light penetrating. When that's the case, for example, CISRU can correct your colors, but cannot add the red color back because it wasn't in the original photo. So it's not hallucinating, and by the way, that's a technical term. It's not hallucinating colors that are not there. What it's doing is it's taking your scene and bringing it to the surface where broadband daylight illuminates, sunlight illuminates the world. I hope that wasn't too long, but I hope that's helpful. But Chris, do send me an email.
I'm sure you'll be hearing from him. Another question about see-through from Alireza. I apologize if I got your name pronounced incorrectly there. Asking, how long does it take to process an image? Can it work on videos?
Another excellent question, and one that's asked a lot. There are two parts to the algorithm. The first part actually estimates distance between the camera and every object in the scene. And the second part, using that distance information, puts the colors back. The putting the colors back part is very quick. It's about 10 to 15 seconds per image. However, the distance estimation part is slow and it's a bottleneck. So because of that, right now, it cannot work real time. But we're working on making it real time and developing new hardware and software to be able to do that, because essentially our goal is one day to go diving, take a video, and see the colors as they are without the water in between. So right now it works for video, but in post-processing, not real time.
She also, I believe it's a she, again, I apologize if I got that wrong, is interested in contacting you to collaborate and was wondering what the best way to do that would be.
Absolutely. We could share on the website my FAU email, or on my website there's my email. Mm-hmm. So we can certainly do that. I'd be happy to connect with everyone who's interested.
Okay, yeah, email seems to be the way of things these days.
Yes, and if there are folks who are in research, I can already start working with them and run their images using see-through, even though the software is not out for the general public. For non-commercial purposes, I can already start working with scientists. So if you're doing coral labeling, for example, like Chris was, we can probably start working together soon. So please send me an email.
Oh, fantastic. New collaborations are always fun.
Always.
Looks like I just got a message. Someone who helps out behind the scenes here at Behind the Science is going to be sending you an email to connect you guys. So our next question here is from Rebecca. Going back a little bit to advice, she says that my daughter really wants to be a marine biologist and study at FAU. I'm not sure if her daughter is in undergrad or grad school, but if you have anything besides just internships that you think would be helpful.
You know, I always recommend to young people starting their undergrad, whatever discipline they're going into, to learn programming, because at this point in time, we need the flexibility to control the analyses we're doing, rather than taking a software that somebody else has written and applying it to our data. Especially if you're in biology or ecology, you're gonna want to be able to have that flexibility. So take a programming class. It doesn't really matter what language, it's just to get you thinking in that direction. And I think that you will find that really helpful throughout your academic or non-academic career.
Yeah, having that on your resume definitely makes you stand out. And if you can do that and do the fun field work part of it, then you'll be at the top of the pile rather than in the middle of the pile, probably.
Definitely, definitely.
I didn't get on that bandwagon, and
not too late, Madeline, not too late. There's many resources now, what's called MOOCs, massive open online courses, that you can attend just in your computer and learn all kinds of specialized or generalized courses for free. So it's not too late.
Josh was telling me the same thing last week, that it's not too late, but I don't know. Hard to teach an old horse new tricks. But how many languages, computer languages, do you know?
Computer languages or languages?
Like coding. Well, I guess both.
Well, not that many. I know Python, MATLAB. I used to know C++. I don't use it so much anymore. So maybe, 2 more. But if you understand the pseudocode aspect, when you need to learn a new one, it's not that hard. So anyone will do.
Okay. And then
anyone will do.
Languages do you know?
It's 2 and then half and half. I speak Turkish, that's my native tongue. I speak English, and I speak enough Spanish to get around, and I speak enough Hebrew to pick a fight, but not to write or do more complex tasks.
You know, frequently the conversational is more important than other parts. So.
Yes.
We've got time for a few more questions. Our next one here is, what do you like to do in your free time when you're not doing your research, diving on a reef or taking pictures or trying to make those pictures real life?
I really enjoy cooking and eating. Sometimes I try to balance that with yoga, but free time has been getting smaller and smaller as my career is going further and further. So somewhere between cooking and eating and trying to burn that off, I think that's where you'll find me.
I can appreciate someone who likes to cook. I love cooking, and it's sometimes so hard because there's so many recipes that I want to make that I'm like, this is not healthy. I can't eat all of this.
Yeah, yes, I also, coming from the Aegean coast of Turkey, where we eat everything fresh that comes out of the ground, I turned out as a bit of a food snob, unfortunately. So I really, really, you know, go into the recipes and the ingredients and what I want to make, which of course makes a simple dinner that would have been 45 minutes to prepare, you know, a 3-day adventure. So gets blown out of proportion a bit.
You gotta get to the farmer's market and get your fresh produce. Go and buy some fresh fish.
Actually, Florida's great for all of those, so
yeah.
I'm thankful one more time.
Yes, definitely. Well, it looks like we've gotten through most of those public questions, so I think we'll start to wrap it up. But thank you so much, Derya, for joining us. I had said earlier, we saved the best for last, and I think that's definitely true. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Madeline. I also enjoyed it very much. Thank you, everybody who attended.
Yeah. So yes, thanks to our audience, as always, for tuning in and asking wonderful questions that definitely got Derya thinking a bit there. I hope that you guys have really enjoyed this Behind the Science web chat series. Through the past couple of months, we've had the unique opportunity to really give you guys a chance to get to know our researchers, our scientists and engineers through these casual chats. And we're really glad we've had that opportunity, not just to learn more about them as people and their science as well, but we are going to take a little bit of a break for the rest of the summer. We're planning to resume these chats in the fall, so definitely stick with us. But in the meantime, definitely check out our virtual resources site, which you can see here. You can watch all of the previous chats from Behind the Science on that site. You can check out our virtual tours that we've started, so you can get a behind the scenes look at the Harbor Branch campus. You can also check out a decade's worth of ocean science lectures that we have on our website as well. And then another thing that you can find on the Harbor Branch website is our Speakers Bureau program. This is a program where we can connect you and your community to our researchers. So you can check out the website to figure out how you can request a lecture from one of our researchers. We can do those online using platforms like this during this unprecedented time, and then we'll be able to do in-person lectures again, hopefully soon. So thank you guys so much for joining us for all of these talks. It has been my pleasure to act as your host. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.